Hello everybody, and welcome to another puzzle challenge video with ChessUniversity.com. This is Ryan Murphy, and before we jump into our new puzzle challenge for the day, I want to, as usual, by now, review our previous puzzle solution. So this is the puzzle from yesterday. The difficulty was supposed to be for beginners, and it's white to play and find the best move. And to be honest, there's really not too many moves to even consider, so you can kind of find this one by elimination, and you don't even have to see very far to realize that like most of the other options aren't very good for white. So the one thing to notice here is that white has the rook hanging right on e1, which is a pretty big problem, and white's also attacking the knight on c6, so we know that we'd like to take the knight, but then they take our rook, and that's no good. So yeah, that eliminates one of our main captures as a candidate. We don't really have any checks to consider, so the next thing you look at are threats, ways of attacking your opponent's pieces. And so the really only move that does anything threatening at all is the move rook to e3, which also happens to be a fork. And so if you saw this far, that's already pretty good. That's really like, this is all you really need to see to convince yourself that there's not a whole lot else you can do in terms of forcing moves. And now black's in trouble. A very natural move would be to retreat all the way back to c8, but then after rook takes b3, there's really not much to be done because this knight on c6 is hanging, and if it moves away, then the bishop on b4 will hang to the rook. So that's obviously really good for white. Backing up. Where else can the queen go? Well, obviously they could sack their queen on e3, but that's not going to help them very much. Really the best thing they can try for is queen h4, trying to, well, keep the queen near white's king, and also putting pressure on e4 so that this knight's not able to move. In here, if you thought taking the bishop was good, I mean, it's certainly fine, though there's lots of complications in this position. For example, now if black finds the best move, which is knight to d4, things get rather unclear. The main reason being that this queen is tied to this pawn, which leads to, you know, a fork for black. Also, there's a threat of knight e2 obviously in the position to chase the queen away. There's a lot of tricks that black has, and black has enough compensation here to be okay, is what this ends up being. But if we back up, so after queen h4, we don't actually have to take the bishop right away on b3. We can start with a very nice move of simply retreating the bishop back to g2. Now this is not part of the solution. If you saw this far, good job. But bishop g2 is a really nice prophylactic move because now this pawn never hangs with check. Right? This bishop's like very well defended, defended by the king, and it's keeping the king safe. And the bishop is still hanging. Also, the bishop can't go anywhere. If the bishop takes here, this pawn's protected twice. You can just take it. You can also start by flicking this move in, but that's just being fancy. And yeah, it can't. I mean, if it goes to a2, that doesn't really help it because the knight is also hanging, as we talked about earlier. So yeah, basically in this position, there are too many black pieces under attack, so white's going to win material. So really, this was more of a defensive puzzle, realizing that your rook's hanging. You don't really have much else you can do with it except create a counterattack. And then if you keep calculating the lines, you'll see that there are ways to improve over just taking the bishop right away. But that was the puzzle from yesterday, so just a simple fork, but there was more to it if you wanted to use that as an exercise to calculate more. And yeah, now we can move on to today's new puzzle, which is the end of a game played on chess.com between Li and Wang. This is one of the older PNW CC Online Blitz tournaments, and it's white to play in checkmate. So hopefully you guys will see this one. Again, it's supposed to be for more beginner players. It's supposed to be an easier puzzle since we're still at the beginning of the week. And now I'm going to rewind to the start and see how we got here. This is actually the very end of the game, about to be move number 35. So a lot of moves to go through, but we'll see how we got there. So this started out as a Slav. So far this is all mainline theory. Bishop f5, yep, e3. Pawn to e6, bishop c4. This is one of the popular lines. The other main option in this position is knight e5 after... Sorry, instead of e3, I should say, is knight e5, trying to take back with the knight. And for those of you that don't know, the move a4 is played to prevent black from going b5 and protecting their pawn. All right, so both sides develop naturally. This is all still very well-known stuff. Queen to b3, yep, a5, knight a2. This is a line, but it's actually not very good for white. It's a sideline. Now the best move is not c5, but that's what black played. I've actually made this mistake myself before in Blitz. Yeah, here here you can actually drop the bishop back, and it's supposed to be like there's some perpetuals on the queen. Yeah, I think after knight a2 here, you're supposed to move the bishop. So c5 gets pretty messy. So takes, takes. White now has 2 bishops and tries to go after the light squared bishop. Yeah, probably black shouldn't just give up the bishop pair, or shouldn't give up the other bishop so easily. So the move bishop e4 makes a lot of sense here to save the bishop. And now the bishop would have the option of retreating towards the queen side if necessary. And of course, the knight on h4 doesn't look very, purposeful. So for example, if f3, bishop c6 looks fine. I suppose you could also go bishop d5 here, and then recapture with the pawn if there's ever a trade. And this would help black to stabilize the center. You could also take with the knight, because it comes with the tempo on the other knight. So that all would look pretty good for black, but instead black just left the bishop on g6, and eventually white took it, and now it's just a position where white has 2 bishops and very good central presence for not much in return. So yeah, keeping the bishop on the board. G5 was played, trying to go for some kind of attack with g4, I suppose, which in blitz I suppose could work sometimes. But white's not deterred, they just play in the center. Bishop f4 is a very nice move. There's actually no way to break through on the king side for black. So here the knight is hanging on d6, so they got to deal with that threat first. You can't go all in like this, because white will just take the knight, and there is no checkmate here. So pawn takes here. There is a check on g5, but you can cover on g3 with either the bishop or the queen, and white would be winning. So yeah, that's the end of that attack. So yeah, the attack doesn't work, so we can go back here. So knight c8 was played, saving the knight, but obviously this is a very sad position for black, because they have 2 knights facing off against 2 bishops. The bishops are excellently placed, and the knights are some of the saddest knights I've ever seen. Black's king's not castled, white's king is castled, white has full control of the center. There's not too much more you have to say here. White is completely dominant in this position, and now it takes the pawn on g4, queen h4, threatening mate. And here, there's a couple ways you can stop mate. You can play f3, which seems pretty safe, because the bishop's covering the dark squares. You could also play queen h3 and trade that way. And in the game, that's what white went for. Takes, takes, takes. And now bishop c4 was played. Not the most precise, but it's okay. I think f3 is just like holds everything together. It cuts the rook from attacking the bishop. It keeps the pawn chain all together. And it highlights that in this endgame, white's not in a rush, because white just controls all the squares. They don't have to do anything particularly special here. So knight f6, now f3 was played, knight to e7, so black's trying to get their knights into play. King g2 kicks the rook out, rook goes back to h8, bishop to b5 check, knight c6, rook a to c1, rook to c8, bishop to d6, cutting the king off so it's hard for it to run away, king d7, bishop back to g3, and king e7. And again, like, it's nothing terrible is immediately happening to black here. It's the problem is they can't move any of their pieces. Even though the rooks are finally connected on move 28 for black, black's structure isn't very good because you have these double pawns on the queen side. And white just, again, the center pawns being like this means that the knights just have nowhere to jump, so they can't even create threats. So rook fd1, looking at potential breakthroughs with d5 in the center. It's a very common idea against the Slav and the Caro-Kann to play d5 and break through. g5 played to kick the knight back. It's a little bit rushed, but it's okay. Again, it's a blitz game. Knight to e8 and d5. And now things become very, very scary. Takes, takes, knight to a7, rook takes rook, and we have rook e1 check in this position. And now it is our critical moment. So if you guys see the answer here, make sure you post it. Again, it's supposed to be an easy puzzle, so very short solution. And if you want to get credit on chessuniversity.com for solving this one correctly, check out the link in the YouTube description and post your solution there. All right, thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see everyone in the next video.